There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the B2B Growth Show, the Human to Human segment. I am Carlos Hidalgo, Chief Strategy Officer for Demand Gen, author of Driving Demand and the UnAmerican Dream. And I am also the host of the Human to Human segment, hashtag H2H for the B2B Growth Show. And today I have a longtime colleague, longtime friend. He and I go back to our days at BMC. And Mark, I think there's always a 6 degrees of separation for BMC software, as we've discussed.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. So Mark Stouse, founder of Proof Analytics, CEO, and just killing it from a startup perspective. So Mark, introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, first of all, it's just great to see you again, and really happy to be on this and having this conversation with you. You know, I mean, I'm a communicator turned marketer turned business leader turned CEO of a software startup, right? My life is a metamorphosis and then some. And essentially what Proof is we have automated marketing mix modeling. We've automated regression analytics, putting the power that has existed for, 25, 30 years in the Fortune 500. But very expensively and kind of incrementally. And we have harnessed it to the power of automation. And now we're off to the races in a really big way. I mean, marketing mix modeling has been the gold standard for understanding marketing ROI for a long time. I mean, it is the application of advanced regression analytics to the marketing business equation. It is one of those things, though, that the cost of it, the difficulty in scaling it, and the slowness of delivery of the analytics has kind of kept it a rarefied discipline in the Fortune 500 for a long time. So you see it a lot in retail, you see it a lot in B2C. You have not really seen it a lot in B2B until just recently. Part of that is the availability of data has exploded in B2B, but also people are starting to realize that multi-touch attribution and a lot of the other things, while they have a purpose and they deliver value, you can't use them to decide how much money you're going to spend and where.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting viewpoint. It's one that I agree with, quite frankly. And I've talked about a lot with some of the clients that I've had over the years. So when you were talking about that data, we were talking a little bit before we came on air about the relationship. It's more than just the data. It's the relationship that the data has to the business. We were talking about the dollars, but you hit on something that's near and dear to every CMO's heart and every marketer's heart is the allocation of budget. And you and I both have been in meetings before where there's a lot of emotion that can go around in a budget meeting. So how are you right now seeing that data that companies are using, Fortune 500, mid-market, otherwise, and saying, hey, we're going to actually use this to shape our behavior as a company, where we spend, what we spend on, how we spend it, how are they stewarding the budget, which is something that marketing people don't talk a whole lot. So give me some flavor on that you're seeing in your clients and some of the best practices that you've been able to encounter.
Well, I think that the issue is that the data is really important, without doubt, right?
Mm-hmm.
The analytics without data is like a gun with no bullets, right? I mean, it's just not going to do much for you. However, data is by itself a static measurement that says this happened at this time, full stop, right?
Okay, can you repeat that again? Because I think that's so important when I read, oh, it's all about the data. Say that statement again, because I want everybody to hear that.
Sure. So the bottom line is that it's really important, but it's a static measurement of something that happened at a certain time in a certain place, and it doesn't tell you anything about why it happened, how it happened, what else might have impinged upon it or made it happen. It just says this happened. And that's important, but is in no way the end game.
Right.
And so this is why we can talk about KPIs and it's relevant, but it is in no way the final solution to the problem. The final solution is all about the fact that really what we're talking about here is not static, it's dynamic and relational. It is how did this thing impact this thing over here? And a big part of this, particularly in B2B, but also in B2C, is the issue of time lag. The fact that when you make a marketing investment, you put something out into the marketplace, it does not have, for the most part, an immediate impact. There is a delayed effect. And then, so let's say that you do something and there's a delayed effect on the beliefs and the mentality of your audience. And then, so that took a while to happen. And then it's going to take more time for them to translate those changing beliefs, those changing understandings into action in terms of buying your product. So at Honeywell Aerospace, where I was CMO, the time lags were months for the most part, because we were talking about a very long business cycle to begin with. And we were talking about audiences that changed their views very slowly and carefully. This was a function of risk and risk mitigation, which is kind of a dramatically under-discussed topic in B2B as a rule. But it's the reason why sales cycles in B2B are what they are, right? I mean, more than 50% of it is risk mitigation and due diligence on what the vendor is saying. The vendor is actually, after a certain point in time, the source of the risk.
Yes.
Right. So coming back full circle, you have all this data that represents this universe that's swirling around, right? And you have to be able to associate that data and say, okay, this is the outcome that we were striving for. These are the 10 things that we were doing, hopefully to have an impact on this end game. What's the stack rank, right? What's the most powerful, the second most powerful, the third most powerful, net of time lag. So really, this is actually, a great analogy here for everybody is if you have a 401k and you manage it and you're called upon by your employer from time to time to rebalance your 401k, it's the same idea, right? You are rebalancing your marketing spend based upon what is actually happening out there in the marketplace.
So it's definitely not it's not the Bitcoin of marketing is what I'm hearing.
Right. No, not at all.
So let me ask you, because you said something that I think is really important, because I hear this from marketers all the time. The pressure from the C-suite to show immediate results. And I just got off the phone yesterday with a colleague who said, I'm getting hammered, and they've been in the role for 45 days. So how should marketers use the data that they have, and again, whether or not they have a system like Proof or anything, to show and prove to and actually educate, I believe, the C-level that marketing is not a wishing well. We don't drop a coin in, wish for something, and all of a sudden leads populate and our revenue grows. How are you seeing, or how do you advise your customers at Proof to use the data to educate? Because it really is that pressure in a lot of organizations.
No, it's a huge pressure. And so I was in a QBR not too long ago with a brand new customer. So this customer had ingested some data into Proof, but basically they were totally at the beginning of the process.
Right.
And I had met with the CMO ahead of time, and I had told him, I said, look, if you go in there and this was their Q2, if you go in there and you're comparing your Q2 to the sales leader's Q2, this is not going to work well. This is just not going to work. I said, I don't know what the time lag is, but there is a time lag in your business. And this is just going to be dangerous. So sure enough, he had his own plan. So he stood up, he delivered his grand and glorious marketing summary for Q2.
Mm-hmm.
The sales leader stood up and delivered, pretty much a really tough report out. And he ended up by saying, and once again, we see marketing's report as evidence of how disconnected from reality they really are.
Wow.
Right. So I raised my hand in the back of the room, and I say, hey, I'm Mark Stouse. I'm with Proof Analytics. Right. I think that actually this is not representing what's actually happening here. And so we talked about time lag. We talked about the fact that marketing impact and sales impact are asynchronous across time and space. And that it's one thing to kind of know this conceptually. And I think that a lot of people do know kind of conceptually. But if you can't say this is the time lag, and this is the point in the calendar where you're going to see the results from this, you're going to have a problem. And so you want to talk about high wire act. I mean, it was kind of where I rushed in where angels fear to tread, and fortunately it worked out. But I pulled up Proof on their big screen, and I did a real life demo with their data right there, not knowing what the answer was going to be. Right.
Right.
And sure enough, right, marketing and sales are separated by about 5 quarters. So I said, marketing's Q2 had absolutely nothing to do with your Q2.
Right.
Nothing at all. Right. Your Q2 was impacted by the previous, Q1, a year and a quarter. Right. And I said, so there is no, hey, you know what? We're halfway through the quarter. We need marketing's help to pull out this quarter. That's just not happening in this business. In some businesses, you could, because the cycle time is tight enough, but not in this one. And there's many others like it, right? Where the die is cast. And so one of the things that this means in many B2B marketing organizations is that the risk on their spend is back end loaded. And so that means that they won't know for a long time, really, unless they have analytics, unless they're running regression, right? They won't know whether they're even on track to have a good outcome, right? In 5 quarters. And so you have to, this is where regression becomes so critical. It's the early warning system, right? It's, hey, this is the track we're supposed to be on, but we're actually down here and it doesn't look like things are going to get better. So maybe we ought to kill this thing early before we have spent every last dime in the budget on this, because probably not going to get better.
Yep.
So this is that's a really important statement here, and you're not going to get that same level of insight from the raw data. That's not my opinion. That's just a mathematical fact.
No, and I agree with that. And that's, to me, data without context is just data. So one of the things I hear, one of the pushbacks I hear from CMOs, SVPs, marketing, whomever, whether they agree with you or not, oftentimes you hear, yeah, but we weren't built to be a data science organization. Or, there's so much data, we don't even know how to begin. Or we look at the numbers and they don't tell a story. So what kind of skill set, really just at the human level, are you seeing to say, it's one thing to show a dashboard, it's another thing to know the story, both the backstory and then the future story of what that dashboard is showing. So what kind of skill set are you seeing, whether it's from a marketing organization, and I've even said, go partner with your BI group if you can't figure it out. What are you seeing in the market right now that marketing teams are doing to enhance that skill set?
Well, it's without a doubt, it is always a collective solution. So if you can go out and hire 10 PhDs in data science, and they will absolutely know how to crunch your data, but they will have no domain knowledge around your business or marketing or anything else. So there's a term in data science that essentially gets to the heart of this problem, and that's p-hacking. P-hacking is running all kinds of correlation and regression analytics without a thesis, without an understanding, without any domain knowledge. You're just kind of like everything against everything, and we're just going to kind of look at what pops out, right? And there is actually a time and a place to do that, but not on a regular basis. And so the flip of that relationship, so the data scientists need the marketers and the business people to help guide them, to help build the right models, to answer the right questions. That's the essence of that. The marketers and the business people need the analysts to do this work, or they need software to help do this work.
Right.
Because they don't have a freaking clue most of the time how to do it. Right. And even though, I mean, this is kind of, funny, it's cool, but it's also funny. So I was just named, much to my great and enduring surprise, right, one of the top 10 most influential analytics leaders in the world for 2020.
I saw that. Congrats.
Yeah, no, and it is really cool. But I am not a mathematician. If you asked me to do this, I would bust, right? It's kind of like when you and I were at BMC, I could talk about data center automation. I was totally fluent and all that stuff. But if you put me in a data center and said, turn it on, I wouldn't know how to turn it on.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't know how to operate it, right? I mean, all I am is an empty suit at that point, right? And so, but my skill set is actually in being able to listen to the data scientists, and I know enough about their world to ask the right questions, to listen to the marketers and listen to the business people and kind of bring it all together. So I am a professional consumer of analytics.
Right.
And I'm a kind of a little bit of maybe even a connoisseur of analytics from the standpoint that I'm very I can differentiate, I can distinguish. And I know kind of what is the best thing to use in a particular situation. So I don't ask anymore. I used to do it all the time, but anymore I don't ask a lot of dumb questions, But that's really what makes me an influential analytics leader. It's not, I mean, I'm in there. The other 9 guys, they're all PhDs in data science. They're all mathematicians. So it's sort of like one of those things where you just kind of go, okay, right? I'll take that. Yeah.
I'll take it all day long. So from a marketer perspective who is sitting there, they're saying, yeah, I'm not, I kind of make a joke too, where I say, hey, I sucked at math, so I got into marketing.
Right.
But from that perspective, whether you're an enterprise or mid-market or an SMB, you're still going to have the CEO who's saying, and that's kind of how I got into the business I'm in, as my president said, I gave you $1. What are you turning back for it? If you can't figure it out, your replacement will. Where can they start to, not that they've got to go get their PhD in analytics, but where can they go to find, or what steps would you recommend for them to say, at least get to that connoisseur level? Because when I see people going, oh, we do data-driven marketing, honestly, it makes my teeth hurt because I'm like, nah, do you?
Yeah.
Do you really?
If anything, so the main reason why I think you hear so much about data-driven is that it's alliterative, right? It's if anything, you should be analytics-led, not data-driven.
I like that.
And that's really the deal there. Now, in terms of the way forward, I think that number one, you have to begin to understand the language of business, which is numbers. It is finance. It's not necessary for you to become an accountant, right? But at BMC and at Honeywell, I rotated all my teams, wherever they were in the world, through a local finance for non-financial managers class. Most universities, most colleges have that. It's really important, right, to have a basic fluency in it. Mm-hmm. The other thing we did was we rotated everybody, particularly at BMC, but also at Honeywell, through sales enablement training, right? The week-long, mosh pit from hell, experience, because it really gave all my guys a lot of knowledge, a lot of understanding, a lot of empathy, and a lot of great relationships with sales teams that then became really important. Now, the last thing is, and this is actually one of the things that we discovered a year or 2 years ago with Proof, is that you can't really show up in the marketing analytics space or even other like HR analytics. You can't really show up as a pure SaaS offering and be successful. There's just not enough skill and capacity and capability within these organizations to run it. And people are going to get frustrated, and it's just going to kind of suck, right? And so even though we had built this beautiful automated SaaS platform, we came to the conclusion that we had to deliver it most of the time. We had to deliver it as a managed service. And people really liked that. Even if they were very mature already, so they didn't need help, they were like, you mean I can have you run this for me and it's just cost me a little bit extra, and that means my guys can go do other things? They took that in a heartbeat, right?
Sure.
So I think that is right now, and you'll remember this at BMC, right? IT service management, huge maturity curve, right? This is the same situation, and people are strung out all along this curve. And so as a former CMO, right, I mean, running this business, one of the things that's really important for us is segmentation, right?
Sure.
Knowing who we should be really talking to right now, because we can't afford to talk to everybody. But that said, right, you have to nurture in some way, shape, or form the entire curve, because as people come up the curve and they are ready for something like Proof, it becomes really important that they know about you.
Right. So
the last thing I just say about this real quick,
of course,
right, is that it's really important to understand how this all evolved. So people are doing all kinds of marketing and PR and all this kind of stuff for years. And then beginning about 25 years ago, they came under significant pressure for the first time, to prove stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so all they knew to do, given the state of technology and the state of the world, right, is to begin to measure things. And so they were just measuring that which they were doing at the time.
Right. Yeah.
So that has colored the mindset on this whole thing for ages, right? The reality is actually that's you're starting at the wrong end of the pole, so to speak, if you start there. The place that you really have to start is, what is my CEO, my CFO, my business leaders, what do they want to know? What are their top 10 questions? Those top 10 questions will spawn one or more models. So these are analytical models. These are sort of, think of it as your hypothesis of how you think things are adding up, how they're impacting each other in to achieve something, right, that they're interested in. Once you have the model, you have to instrument the model, and that's the data, right? But you're usually not, most of the time, you're using maybe 20% of the data that you have collected overall. So there's a lot of data that you're collecting through measurement that is sort of maybe not something you should be collecting too much longer. I mean, it's very expensive to do that. So this is a process of reverse engineering. You're starting with what the business wants to know, and you just kind of move through the process of scientific discovery, which is really what undergirds all this. And you say, okay, now I've got my question that I have to answer. I've got the model, which theoretically is going to provide the answer. I've got the data in the model, and now I can hit compute, and it's going to give me an answer. And then I'm going to say, I wonder if I can make this an even better model by introducing some additional data or a different kind of perspective. We're going to create a different model, and we're going to explore that. That's really the way that this works, right? So it's not a bottoms up. It's a tops down, not organizationally, but logical. It's a tops down. And then once you fill in all these blanks, tops down, you hit compute, and it comes right back up to the top. And in the end, What you're really trying to do is you're trying to say, okay, this is how it all shook out. This is what's really working. This is what's not really working. We're going to stop doing that. We're going to do more of this. And we're going to take all that. We're going to plug that into our planning and budgeting for next time. And now you've got the full loop, right? The full life cycle.
Right. So you said something about tops down, and let me give you my perspective. And then you also likened it to the ITSM, the IT service management that we worked on at BMC when we were both there.
Yeah.
I would say, and I'm curious to your thought, that we are at a point, especially in B2B, where this is an imperative that marketing groups get their arms around. And here's why. A stat from McKinsey that said over 85% of CEOs are now looking at marketing as a growth driver, and only 23% are saying you're actually meeting that mark. So if I am a marketing executive, that is my oh crap moment to say, oh, so if I'm going to go talk to my CEO, that's a conversation that I'm going to have. I can't walk away going, well, we can't do that. CEOs are already, we know they're looking for growth. We know they're looking for revenue creation from marketing. So am I being too much of an alarmist here? Or
Not at
is
all.
this truly an imperative for marketing groups and executives that actually want to survive and thrive?
Absolutely. And I think that what's happening right now, so this is March the 5th, the market dropped 950 points today, right?
Yep.
Erasing the gains from yesterday. High volatility, great uncertainty, increasing fear. You're going to see, even if you don't see a true economic correction, you're going to see a correction in the mindset of business leaders.
Yep.
And you're going to start tightening it up, and they're already starting to tighten it up.
Yes.
And so if you are B2B and your impact is obscured by time lag to begin with, and by the complexity of the business,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to be super clear on this. You cannot measure your way out of that hole. It is just not happening.
You're right.
It's just not. I'm not trying to be difficult, and I'm not trying to be false alarmist, right? It's just talk to a data scientist. They'll tell you the same thing, right? So you're going to have to start using regression, because you're going to have to understand the relationships between everything that you're doing and everything the business cares about and everything in between. You're going to have to understand the time lag so that you can calibrate expectations. You're going to have to deal with budget cuts that you cannot peanut butter, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to work anymore. You're going to have to identify what is really secondary and tertiary priority in your marketing spend, and you're going to have to whack that so that you can really preserve and even strengthen the stuff that's most important. And if you don't use regression, you will not be able to know what that is for a fact. I mean, that's just the truth.
Yeah. You won't get pushback here. And it is amazing to me when I see CMOs and executives in marketing actually run from this. And I'm my thing, just in all the data and even in the CEOs that I speak to, you need to be running towards it. You need to embrace this. And yes, it is a massive sea change. To your point, when you said 25 years ago, I had visions of Jeff Honeycomb in my head saying, I've given you this much money. How much did you return back to the organization? And we did have to say, what we put in today is not going to produce tomorrow, because we have a sales cycle or a buy cycle in that enterprise that's 9 to 12 months. So if we're not investing now, you can expect that hit to come later down the road.
That's right. So here's the other thing that really plays into this, and you just touched on it, right? The sales contribution, right, is linear. Okay?
Yes.
If I hire at a certain point in the maturity of the company, I know that if I hire 2 more sales guys, I'm going to get X amount more revenue.
Yep.
And it's going to happen. I mean, there's certainly there is time lag there. There is not only time lag in the deal, right, but there's also time lag in bringing a sales rep from being unproductive to productive.
Right.
Right. But it's not, what it can be from a marketing perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So what's actually amazing is how much marketers have gotten absolutely right just by intuition.
Yes.
So, for example, one of the things that you hear a lot in B2B is consistency matters. That is actually really true, but they don't necessarily know why. The reason why it matters so much is that the time lags are so significant that if you've got a lot of oscillation like this, it's just going to whipsaw through your extended impact, right? And it's just going to be weird. It's just not going to work, right? So you would be better off actually having a lower spend than you would ideally like that is pretty much locked in. Yep. And then what you do with it based on what the analytics are telling you changes.
Yeah. No, agree 100%. You know, I could literally sit and talk about this stuff. My kids always tease me that I geek out on this marketing stuff. Obviously, Mark, you're really passionate, but we are at time. So before we wrap up, where can listeners find out more about Proof Analytics? Where can they find you? I know you do a lot of speaking as well. So just give them some of that detail.
Sure, absolutely. So proofanalytics.ai is the website. So PROOF and then analytics and then .ai. My Twitter is at Mark Stouse. The Proof Analytics Twitter feed is Proof Analytics. So you can find me there. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Share a lot of content. So, and I do get around. In fact, in about a week or so, I'm supposed to be at South by. We're just doing a keynote, but we're trying to figure out whether that's actually going to happen now.
Yeah, that's up in the air as of this morning, especially with IBM and Twitter and others pulling out.
Absolutely, and I mean, talking about human to human, right? I mean, there's nothing in my business that's worth me getting sick or anyone else getting sick, right? So, so I may punt for that reason, but we're just trying to kind of figure it out right now.
All right. Well, Mark, thanks so much for sharing your time, sharing your knowledge and experience. While we did work at BMC, we actually reconnected of all places, if you remember, in a United Club Lounge in Chicago.
That's right.
Where we just kind of were like, wait a minute, out of context, but I know that guy. So I'm thrilled that serendipity occurred and just that we're friends. And it's been almost 20 years that you've put up with me. So thank you so much for being a guest. This is going to be a wrap on the B2B Growth Show. Tune in for podcasts like this and many others. Thanks to Mark and his entire team. And go check him out at proofanalytics.ai.
I hate it when podcasts incessantly ask their listeners for reviews, but I get why they do it, because reviews are enormously helpful when you're trying to grow a podcast audience. So here's what we decided to do. If you leave a review for B2B Growth in Apple Podcasts and email me a screenshot of the review to james@sweetfishmedia.com, I'll send you a signed copy of my new book, Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. We get a review, you get a free book. We both win.